Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are you? I'm a little late due to some family issues. In essence, I'll just let it be known that I hate hospitals and have spent far too much time in them lately. In addition, I have to announce that the Luna Fiend is no longer with us, having finally succumbed to the vagaries of age. She will be missed in ways I can't even begin to explain. Rest in peace, girl. I finally finished Neptune's Scars, the first follow-up to the Derelict Saga, and it's with an alpha reader. With any luck, my coal mine canary will breeze through it without finding any major issues, and then I can open it up to the patrons to peruse while I finish up the recording. Getting this one done is a big win for me. Expect to see it in all its glory this summer. With that, I'm going to sleep in my own damn bed instead of a hospital couch and maybe even have a beer. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again soon. Here's episode 10 of The Black.
When it reached the bottom of the trench, AUV slowly turned toward the largest tube-worm bed. During AUV-5's survey, Catfish had discovered that the animals were not only spread out along the trench, but that the beds were of increasing size as they reached the trench's middle. He had programmed AUV-2 to head for this specific area. The shark-like robot remained 10 meters from the ocean floor as it headed across the darkness to its target. Ignoring the lanternfish it disturbed, it also ignored the way the tube worms reached for it. AUV-2 had a single goal: capture a sample. When it reached the coordinates, its cameras began taking blue light pictures and video. The AUV descended to 2 meters away from the bed. The tube worms slowly moved in its direction, but the robot was out of range. The AUV paused as it slowly lowered to a level just below the approximate height of the worms. It sent a command to the modified sand sampler, and the sharpened metal maw opened its jaws. Level and still, the robot's brain sent a signal to the propellers. They whirred at full speed. The worms shivered from the vibration as if they knew what was coming. They tried to move, but they were too slow. The robot crashed into the bed, its sharpened lower jaw ripping through the flesh of one of the giant stalks. The flat head of one of the worms separated from its long body and slid into the receptacle. The robot's instruments immediately noticed the weight change and slammed the jaw shut. Writhing inside the sample chamber, the head bit and snapped. The robot shuddered and emptied its ballasts. It canted toward the top of the ocean for a split second, and then it was stuck. The other heads, 4 of them, had stabbed out, maws clamping to the propeller casings and holding on with incredible strength. The AUV increased power to the propellers. Jets of water slammed down to the center of the bed and the giant open eye that stared upward. The eye closed in pain and the tube worms let go of their prey. The AUV slipped off course and traveled upward and to the left. Its right propeller had been damaged by the attack and was running at less than half speed. AUV-2 compensated by throttling back on the left propeller and managed to return to its course. Below it, the ocean floor shook with anger. The tremor started beneath the bed but slowly radiated outward across the trench. Clouds of sand and rock vibrated off the floor. If lower midnight had had any light, the ocean floor would have been impossible to see. For 10 meters above the huge trench, the water was choked with sediment. Every tube worm bed had opened its eyes, their long tentacles snatching at the ocean as if to catch prey. But the movement was from anger instead of hunger. AUV-2 sped upward from lower midnight, its seismic sensor tracking the quake. A large bubble of water followed behind it. When the robot reached a depth of 18,000 feet, it squirted a data stream to the closest Wi-Fi receivers. AUV-2 had been programmed to alert the rig if something changed on the ocean floor. AUV-2 was sounding the alarm. The hallways were more or less empty. The rig's thrusters were slowly moving it toward the center of the trench. By nightfall, the crew would no doubt begin dropping the drill string, and tomorrow morning they'd start drilling all over again. Only this time it would go faster. PPE didn't even want a core. They wanted another taste of the black. Catfish hurried to Shauna's room. He hated it when a rig started moving. The larger submersibles weren't nearly as bad as the small ones. The moment the ballasts started emptying, rigs sometimes rose hundreds of feet. When that happened, he always worried the damned things were going to tip over. All it would take was a large wave to knock it a few degrees to one side. After that, recovery was nearly impossible. He felt the rig swaying beneath his feet as it churned northward toward its target. When he reached Shauna's door, he was nervous and a little seasick. He knocked twice and waited. There was no response. Catfish sighed and double-tapped the door with the flat of his palm. "Come on, Shauna, we need you at the drilling office." He waited another beat and felt stupid. What if she wasn't in there? Or taking a shit, or a shower? He'd just be out here talking to himself while... The door opened a crack. Shauna peered out at him with red, sleep-deprived eyes and a wild tangle of hair. "What?" she croaked. Catfish blinked at her. You okay?" "You woke me up," she yawned. He grunted. "You do know it's almost noon, right?" Her eyes opened wide. "What? It can't be noon." A grin spread over his face. "Did you hide some hooch and tie one on last night? Because you know you have to share." She shook her head. "Give me a sec. I'll bet the boss is on the warpath." Catfish chuckled, something like that. "See you in the..." The rig shook and then swayed. A klaxon alarm began its incessant grind. He steadied himself in the doorway. "What the fuck was that?" "All hands! All hands!" Vrabel's voice said through the intercom. "Report to action stations. This is not a drill." "The hell?" Catfish asked. The situation he'd been thinking about earlier? Yeah, the rig was listing. He was damned close to pissing his pants. "Get dressed. Calhoun's gonna want to know where his team is." She nodded and closed the door. Catfish made himself flush with the wall as 3 rig crew members went running down the hall toward the rig deck. Leaguer shuddered again. Catfish started running toward the deck stairs. Several crew members were in front of him, their heavy boots clanging on the metal. When he reached the bottom, his ears rang with the groan of heavy machinery, the shouts of men close to panic, and the klaxon. When he and JP had first stepped aboard Leaguer, Gomez had shown them the emergency exits for all portions of the rig as well as the location of the lifeboats. Catfish had thought that part of the tour rather unnecessary since signs and maps were posted every 30 feet. Now he was glad. Paying no attention to the signs, he jogged toward the non-listing side and grabbed hold of a railing. The red and orange lifeboat was a meter away. He closed his eyes and hoped he wouldn't be getting in the damn thing. "Ballast! Ballast now!" Gomez's voice screamed from the deck. Catfish tried to see what was going on back there, but he already knew. Gomez wanted the rig crew to refill the ballast. "Port side, goddammit!" The rig's list increased. He knew in his mind it was barely a few degrees, but that didn't make it less terrifying. Catfish closed his eyes and wished he had a cigarette. Not a damned e-cig, but something absolutely stuffed with tar and nicotine. A grinding noise vibrated his teeth. His feet moved on the deck and his inner ear twitched. The rig was sinking lower into the ocean on the port side. Leaguer started to right itself. "Starboard, now!" Gomez shouted. The grinding noise increased as the pump sucked water into the tanks. He had a moment to wonder if JP and the other divers were going to be inspecting the rig's substructure tomorrow. Assuming there was a tomorrow. And then the rig started to compensate. As it sank further into the water, it became stable. Gomez whooped, and Catfish heard other men shouting in victory. "All hands," Vrabel said over the intercom. "Leaguer is safe for now. Remain at action stations until we give the all-clear." He opened his eyes and looked at his left hand. The knuckles were white. Fingers aching, he slowly loosened his grip and let out a sigh. They might be safe for now, but he wasn't moving a goddamned inch until Vrabel gave the all-clear. He stood at the railing and stared at the lifeboat for another hour. Night had fallen. The rig was once again underway toward the center of the trench. Instead of emptying the ballasts and riding high in the water, Vrabel had ordered them half full. It would be at least 3 a.m. before they reached the spot to drill the second well. There had been little warning of the bubble. Leaguer had been lucky. Damned lucky. If the bubble had clipped the port ballast instead of merely causing a huge wave, Leaguer would be underwater. Thankfully, Gomez was good at his job. When the rig canted to starboard, filling the port side ballast stabilized the floating town. If not for that, Leaguer would have kept listing and they would have lost her. Vrabel had kept everyone at action stations for another hour after the emergency was over. He'd ordered Terrell to man the sensor arrays and start listening for another seismic event. Once there was one earthquake, aftershocks were likely. Had the rig's ballasts been full when the bubble hit, they would have barely noticed. He sat in the drilling office while the eggheads pored over the readouts. Once he was sure the rig was in safe hands, he handed off the bridge to the XO and headed down to talk to Belmont. He'd ordered the diver to get his crew ready for an inspection trip as soon as Liger reached her position. He needed to know if the incident had weakened any part of the substructure. Although the underwater cameras didn't show any bent or warped steel, Vrabel wasn't going to take any chances. Before they started well 2, Liger had to have a clean bill of health. An inspection would only delay them by another hour or 2. Considering what could have happened, it was a small price to pay. And to be sure the rig wasn't damaged, PPE couldn't put a price on that. He wrote up an incident report, per regulations, and sent it off to PPE. He expected Simpson was probably freaking out back in Houston. Losing a toy this expensive was every company's nightmare. As he filled out the report, noting the time the incident began to when it ended, he made sure to give Gomez credit for saving Liger. Vrabel had a feeling Gomez's next check would have a bonus attached to it. After reports were done and roll call was confirmed, Vrabel headed to his cabin. The adrenaline dump from the incident had left him shaking and exhausted. He'd done his best to hide it from the crew, but he thought for sure Gomez noticed. Vrabel stripped off his khakis and work shirt and lay down on the bed. He closed his eyes and let himself drift. Focusing on his breathing and heartbeat, he managed to calm himself. After 10 minutes, he headed to the bathroom and washed his face with cold water. It helped more than he believed it would. After that, he dressed and headed back to the bridge. Gomez had been waiting for him, a concerned smile on his face. "Okay, Jefe?" Vrabel managed a grim smile. "Yeah, as soon as I can figure out what the hell caused that, I'll be much better." "No shit," Gomez said. "Why didn't we get a warning?" That was the question. The big question. A rumble large enough to create a disturbance that size should have set off the seismic sensors. Instead, nothing. Once he squared things in the bridge, he headed for the drilling office. He clenched and unclenched his fists as he walked. He forced a smile as he greeted his crew in the hallways. It helped ground him, and he knew the crew needed to see him confident and in control. If the crew didn't think he was on top of things, another such incident could really cause problems. The drilling office's air conditioners were a low whoosh below the hum of the computers. He listened to Calhoun, Catfish, and Shauna as they scanned a page of data. "Here," Catfish said and pointed to the screen. "That's where AUV-2 sent out the alert." Vrabel leaned forward in his chair. "What alert?" The tech glanced at him and then back to the screen. "When the bot hit 18K, it started streaming data. One of those packets was an alert." "What kind of alert?" Vrabel asked. "Alert about the ocean floor jumping?" Catfish nodded. Vrabel stifled the urge to leap at the man. "And why the fuck didn't we get the warning?" Calhoun cleared his throat. "The alert came in just after I sent him to find Shauna." Clinch, unclinch. He was afraid to look at his knuckles. The rig chief wanted to beat someone's ass. Calhoun's or Catfish's, it didn't matter. He pushed down the anger. "So no one was manning the station?" "No," Calhoun said. "But look here," he said, pointing to the screen. "The alert came in and less than 2 minutes later we were hit. We wouldn't exactly have had a lot of time to do anything." "Bullshit," Vrabel said. "Fucking bullshit. I could have had Gomez readjust the ballasts. We could have made sure no one was going to go flying over the railing, so don't give me that." Catfish's face flushed. "Mr. Vrabel, can we please focus on what caused the problem? We missed an alert, yes, but if the AUV hadn't been down there to begin with, we would have never gotten it anyway." The rig chief opened his mouth and then closed it. God damn it, the asshole was right. If he hadn't agreed to let Catfish send the thing down there, they would have been even worse off. At least now they had a chance of figuring out what happened. "Okay," Vrabel said. "Sorry. It's been a rough day. I guess I'm looking for someone to blame." Calhoun nodded. "Understood. Catfish, have you examined the sample case yet?" He shook his head. "No, JP said they retrieved AUV-2. It's down there waiting for me, but I wanted to make sure we analyzed the reports first." "You're getting intelligent, finally," Shauna grinned. Catfish lifted his middle finger and shook it in front of her before smiling back. "That said, AUV-2 didn't notice anything odd as it approached the beds. We need to go through the camera footage, but there was no seismic activity whatsoever. Until when? Vrabel asked. Until there, he said, and stabbed a key. The screen switched to a time depth graph. The spike lasted about 10 seconds and then fell off, but AUV-2 was already heading to the surface, so the duration and timing may be a bit off. Calhoun sucked his teeth. Can we pull up the camera footage? Catfish shook his head. I still need to transfer it. AUV-2 sent the data, but not the pictures. It's a result of the malfunction. Vrabel raised his eyes. What malfunction? The tech leaned back in his chair. One of the propellers was severely damaged, he said. I haven't taken a look yet, but JP told me it looks like it's been hit with a sledgehammer. Also, one of the ballast tanks is dented. What the hell could have done that? The chief asked. The three eggheads shared a glance. Vrabel rolled his eyes. Would you guys please tell me what the hell is going on? Calhoun sighed. We would if we could, he said. Until we get the footage and the data lined up, it's going to be damn difficult to answer that question. We're going to reach the site for the second well in 5 hours, Vrabel said. Is there any reason we shouldn't set up a drill string, assuming the rig inspection checks out? No, Shauna said. Besides the fact we ought to wait for the report from Houston. Why the hell would we do that? Vrabel asked. She blinked and then cast her eyes at the floor. I just feel better if we had a chance to get all the readings. I don't exactly have the best equipment to test here. The chief stood and put his hands on his hips. Look, is it oil or isn't it? Calhoun narrowed his eyes and stared at him. It's oil. All the readings show it as being damn sweet crude. But Shauna's analysis proves the stuff is, well, unique. Right, Vrabel said. Unique? Normal? I don't care. If there's no danger to Leaguer, then we're going to drill. Let me know when you get the data from AUV-2, Catfish, and preferably before we drop the drill string. Vrabel spun and headed out of the office. His shift was over. He wasn't due back on the bridge until 5 a.m. and desperately needed sleep. If he was lucky, he'd pass out when he lay on the bed again. If not, then he was sure he'd still be awake when Belmont and the dive crew began their inspection.